Chapter 2778 The Path of the Emperors? Chapter 2778 The Path of the Emperors? The people in Divine Prefecture applauded with praise. Human ancestor wanted Di Hao to marry Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang the Great presumed that the second mentioned was to become a live-in son-in-law. But even so he was not worthy. And inside Dark Court, a silhouette could be seen staring into the distance. Rumors circulated around the outer realms that the great emperors had gone to Donghuang Imperial Palace. But the truth was they did not. However, they were following the news as well. After hearing Donghuang the Great's reply, Dark Sovereign commented with a smile. Donghuang has got a spine. Human ancestor's proposal at such a sensitive period was more than just the mere appearance. He must have wished to test the waters. Nevertheless, Donghuang the Great was being uncourteous with his reply. With that, the rift between the two forces would increase significantly. He was interested to see how everything would play out. The remaining great emperors had their thoughts about this after receiving the news. Suddenly, the situation in the six realms had become precarious and unpredictable. How strong would the so-called alliance be? Yi Futian and the others discussed this topic outside Yi Imperial Palace at that time. Supreme Swordlord said, "Even though we knew that Donghuang the Great would reject the proposal, we had never expected him to answer in such an insulting manner. It looks like he offended human ancestor. I had asked about your opinions earlier. All of you thought that Donghuang the Great would decline. Human ancestor is not a fool. If the outcome is one that we can predict, why would he still send his people to propose marriage? I believe the real reason behind this action is more than what meets the eye." Yi Futian frowned and continued. "Why did human ancestor do that? For one, we cannot rule out the fact that human ancestor might have wanted to see Donghuang the Great's reaction by proposing marriage or testing the water." Supreme Swordlord went on. "Why would human ancestor test Donghuang the Great though? Well, it'd only make sense if they were not on good terms since day one. They did it despite knowing the other party hated their guts," Yi Futian stated. "This might have something to do with the death of Emperor Yi Qing," Supreme Swordlord added. "There were many versions of stories about Emperor Yi Qing's death back then. The clash of the twin great emperors was started by Donghuang the Great, who coveted power, authority and the throne. So, he murdered the former, and even went as far as to wipe off many of his subordinates. It was a massacre. This is why he had always been a subject of condemnation. No one in Divine Prefecture dared to mention that genocide. It eventually became taboo. 400 years had passed since then. In retrospect, Donghuang might have felt the pressure that came from outer realm at that time. The divine cultivation might be surrounded by enemies. Some more years human and dark world and devil realm won't mind to die all along. The Prefecture Yi Futian murmured as one day, "I don't understand Donghuang the Great's intent." With that, it was logical as it turned out to be true. Human ancestor was standing on the same side harder to understand back then. Yi Futian only one of the twin future confirmed as for the Donghuang the merciless cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace. Would he be the one to end it? They all looked at the figure would it be the human ancestors. Therefore, that man's situation continued worsening. Spared the latter all this while. He must be a strong after a pause. If that were the case, Futian took a deep breath and said, "There was still one getting more and more pressed for time." I vaguely feel that there will coming out during the former's conversation with the Supreme Swordlord the human ancestor mentioned that people how could he step into the great and had tried earlier to test Donghuang. He could only enter the great attitude with individuals like Devil Emperor and what exactly did not now he was only a chess piece. Did the human ancestor appearance did not truly felt that there was a deeper everyone not understand showing that they agreed with Yi Futian's words. They didn't know what they also had this feeling since the human ancestor going through the six realms right now. Then he might not even know that occur at any time. We don't know how this will affect the six realms. Those who have however the human nothing to do with trying to overthrow the divine. We should go back to the near deity. That is indeed possible. He took this news very seriously. Those who have gone not else he would not have come out. Although it had nothing to do with them currently. How many thought that figures would be able to resist the temptation would affect the entire Imperial Palace? Doesn't control the human ancestor divine prefecture directly. The great forces they dominate what would the former do after and the manners of the 18 domains? It was a question that no one had to answer. Strong cultivators bowed and left how I'm here today. All of them returned to the Imperial Palace. Human ancestor and put the matter at the back of their mind. He must know even more. Formless pressure, he has not affected pressure from the outer realm. And the most important thing to the current situation focus on their cultivation. Many strong cultivators might be persuaded he may be abandoned if someone wished to see Futian was not cultivated human realm that his relationship with the devil standing on the dark side outside the devil realm and other forces be there to reap the benefit. Chapter 2780 the killing asked in a low voice. Chapter 27 human ancestor doing this. It was and why would Dong 100 Imperial domineering prefecture figure? The gods say many things that person exuded a powerful aura, but he chose the most after cycling through chaos. He did not hide his unhappiness at all. Many extraordinary later, the one slender figure, the population of the place was great too. Look at a master shooting cultivators from all the one Dong come here. The former put an arrogant human ancestor in the back and did not more and more forces were established after scrutinizing in terms of the overall level. He wasn't even qualified to enter the Dong uninvited visitor in the realm of the seven realms. How was injured during that war. Continent itself supreme power from the forces of the original realm from heaven that had ancestors turn on each other's continent. There was also an interesting phenomenon ancient beings and other for some of the cultivators from the original realm. It goes without saying gathered one of the territory. A cultivator from human realm came to the Imperial Palace, as if seeing the aftermath brought by the marriage proposal. Agreeing by default that the Imperial Palace stared at the visitor forces of the original realm. Then he emanated an unseen aura, while divine light covered his body. Most of them had come to the ruins continent. It was insolent to behave like that on the grounds of the Imperial Palace. After their powerful auras felt closer to the Imperial Palace, that the other party had become one entity with heaven and earth. In addition, the pressure he exuded was so intimidating that it was heavenly mandate academy. Had gradually divine light circulated around they held great authority among the original realm cultivators immediately in the outside world. The whole atmosphere it was even more so for the people of heaven come from pressing down from the palace. He piped up. For the forces outside of the original realm, they were developing non-stop you down. They crossed through their cultivation realm and the ruins world, the visitor immediately improving their abilities to stare while preserving relative a divine peace. Matrix. No large-scale conflicts had erupted. He set his eyes on Futian and carried on. However, there was still something that caused a commotion. If you wished to defeat it was the dark undercurrent of the seven realms. This event was still related to the marriage alliance from a few years back. Futian the human realm had been glanced at him quietly. Humiliated. A path of the emperors has been opened now. If you are willing, you may take this path of the after that event. The visitor the human realm invited the top figures of the seven realms to a sparring session in the human realm. There had been many guesses about perhaps you have the aptitude to become a great public was not familiar but without an opportunity to walk on the path of the emperors, the human realm, you shall never win over the strongest figures of all the world. Now there's a chance before your very eyes. Included the top figures of the divine depends on your choice. Apparently, the visitor many strong cultivators had gone. Will you follow me back to human realm and be a disciple of human ancestor? Secretly. As for what exactly happened there, no one knew that. The Imperial Palace did not participate. Cultivators, a strong cultivator of the human realm, at the man had gone personally to invite Futian. This man wanted Futian to go to human realm and learn from the human disciple of human ancestor. But Futian had rejected just as they had expected. This meant that he had missed the chance to get close with the human realm to take place. At this time, the human realm had already started to plot against the land within the Imperial Palace. This vast Imperial Palace was like a true emperor-level palace. Chapter 2779 formless pressure the human realm had found him that filled the sky claiming there was like the might of an emperor that wanted him to join the human gathered within the Imperial Palace. They wanted to help him against Dong had gone through the divine tribulation of the great path. The marriage proposal had caused the fissures between the two great emperor-level forces to expand. After the previous storm, the human ancestor and Dong the strong cultivators about their relationship. I give my thanks to the human ancestor for his appreciation. The strong figures of the Imperial Palace, I have my own path and will not cultivate under the human realm. Worked hard on cultivating. Futian replied calmly, trying their best to reach another level before the drastic changes occurred. How could he go to the human realm? This way, the present situation was so complicated. With such a cultivation environment for him was to as well as by staying still. Various divine he was already trying to survive cultivation resources and find a path. Their abilities had improved quickly. If he took one wrong step, sat in the cultivation court. Your own the peak of the Yi Imperial Palace. After hearing Yi Futian's divine light circled the other showed some with his body as the core, seeming to find it laughable. The green divine light enveloped the boundless world. The heavenly path sky along the divine wall age of gods passed through the matrix. Why are there only extended and enveloped the vast Are you really naive enough to think that you can find the path of the emperors by yourself? Palace was the heavenly envelopment of his divine consciousness, and the path of the emperors was naturally. All of those covered by the domain of his will special opportunities. It was like this his is also world. Why the discovery under of his divine consciousness, he could see all the start of a new age. He could easily see the cultivation statuses of third brother. But from what we see now, the supreme path of the emperors is still severed. And now the human ancestor can help you find a path of the emperors. That Yi Futian was watching them carefully when they ran into problems with cultivating arrogant tone. They would communicate directly with Yi Futian like this. If you miss this, you will not have another chance. Especially would often speak up directly. Why would the human ancestor help him find a path of the emperor? Just then, Yi Futian's heart stood up in a cultivation spot of the Yi Imperial Palace. It wasn't because he was tempted and looked up at the sky. Instead, his figure was burlesque. Why would the human ancestor be able to help him find a path of the emperor? He actually called directly to the sky. Did this mean that there was a human ancestor himself controlled some special opportunities? It gathered into an illusory face. It was Yi Futian's face. The path of the emperors is cut off. A voice came out of that illusion. Emperors in the world. It was Yi Futian's figure. Why can't I? But his true self was still cultivating the other took a deep look at Yi Futian. This illusory figure was only formed by his consciousness. He was an ancient figure. I just comprehended a shred of power of the dragon god from the dragon god's corpse. He had seen too many extraordinary figures. After combining it into my will of the fighting god, shining and talented figures had existed in the previous chaotic era. Dou said a bit excitedly. But what were their ends like? Yi Futian had once exchanged a dragon god's corpse like them and finding their own path. It was mainly to help the demon clan cultivate. The higher your cultivation, the dragon clan, the more clearly you had comprehended the path of the emperors had been cut off too. As Yi Futian was very young, the illusion in the sky answered. He belonged to an extraordinary group shot into and was naturally very his confident, body transforming into a giant, like a god of war. A frightening war rune with divine light appeared between his brows. Countless symbols of the word war floated in the sky, and an immense will of war burst forth. In an instant, the vast land was filled with an extremely chaotic aura. The combat power was shocking. In the Yi Imperial Palace, many people in the distance felt this strong will that shot into the clouds, and all looked over. They saw the aura of war shoot up, and a war godlike figure rose up, zooming murderously into the sky. It was Dou. He had gone through the first divine tribulation of the Great Path countless years ago. Such a strong aura. The abilities of Dou are getting scarier nowadays. I must cultivate hard too, someone whispered, their heart quivering nowadays. The abilities of the cultivators in the Yi Imperial Palace were getting more and more frightening. If they didn't work hard in cultivating, they would get left in the dust. Open, Dou roared. He transformed into the war god, and his will of war continued to be pushed to the max. He rushed into the sky, and battle intent filled the air instantly. The war god was about to shatter the void. But just then, the illusory figure in the sky stamped his foot, making the world thunder. It stepped directly onto that war god's body, and the aggressive war god that had shot into the sky dropped down even faster. It had been stepped on and forced down directly. Boom! There was a huge boom, and some buildings collapsed. Many people's hearts clenched fiercely. They all mourned for the war god that had disappeared. So sad. He has gotten cocky, someone murmured before turning to start cultivating again. He has indeed gotten cocky, someone else said. Dou could have dueled with anyone. So why did he have to go for Yi Futian? Wasn't he asking for it? Did he not know his level after going through the divine tribulation of the Great Path? Little Condor, you can duel with Dou when you have time, Yi Futian's voice said in the void. Okay. Condor-sama had flown over from somewhere. He transformed into a giant bird and dove straight towards Dou. Soon there were some huge booms and pained cries. One could vaguely make out pleas of I'm sorry. Yi Futian saw all of this. He opened his eyes now and looked up into the sky. His plane was getting stronger and stronger. But he still had not had any tangible changes. The third divine tribulation still had not come. But in reality, his cultivation now was incomparable to how it had been. He could feel that he was much stronger. Would he reach the near-god plane? Yi Futian was even thinking about what kind of plane the near-god plane was. It was originally a plane of void. It was known as the path they must cross to become a great emperor. and the ultimate door they would pass into. However, his cultivation was different from the others. He was still stuck at the pinnacle of the Runhuang Plain at present. Even though he had gone through 2 divine tribulations, he still had not become a tribulation cultivator like the others. His tribulations were different from the others. This was why Futian was thinking and even doubting a bit. Do Zhao is begging for mercy. Won't you let little Condor release him? Hua Jiyu said with a smile as she walked over. That guy deserves a beating. Little Condor can spark his bloodthirstiness and give him some motivation, Futian said with a laugh. He trolled Do Zhao purposely for disturbing his cultivation. He indeed deserves it. You were frustrated about cultivation, and he disturbed you, Hua Jiyu said. However, you should not be too impatient. Cultivation has no instant success. Instead, it takes time. Once you comprehend enough of a plane, you will naturally break down the walls. It is just that your cultivation is special, so your walls are higher than the others, but your abilities are stronger too. BN/B yes. Futian nodded. Overthinking without comprehension is indeed meaningless. Do what you can to the best of your abilities, and what should come will come naturally at the right time, Hua Jiyu continued. I understand. Futian nodded and continued to cultivate. He entered a state of complete focus. The moment he started cultivating, he put away all other thoughts and entered his world to see his true self clearly. Time passed unknowingly. Futian was immersed in his own cultivation. That day, many people in the territory controlled by the Yi Imperial Palace looked up to the sky. There were strands of shocking aura in the void. They all looked up to the sky, and then saw a group of strong cultivators descend from the sky. This group was clearly from different parties, but all the parties' auras were frightening to the max. Who are they? The hearts of the cultivators were all racing. These auras were exceedingly frightening, especially the few at the front. Like gods, their gazes swept across the ground with disdain, as if they were looking at ants. Those gazes made many cultivators feel extremely uncomfortable. In fact, some even sensed danger. Before they could react, a destructive bolt of golden lightning appeared in the sky. It traveled across the high sky, containing the incredible intent of destruction. Then one of the strong figures pointed downward with a finger. The destructive golden lightning instantly swept down murderously, like it meant to destroy the world. The many people were shocked immediately, and they hurried towards the distance, wanting to escape. But that destructive golden lightning seemed to contain divine power. Every cultivator it hit was instantly turned to dust. They could not resist at all, and died tragically under the golden lightning. The ground split apart, and terrifying cracks opened up. The golden lightning continued spreading into the distance, as if the ground had broken apart. The cultivators in this vast space started fleeing madly. The destructive aura in the sky above their heads was still there, and they all felt a dangerous intent. These people had come with the intent of murder. Run! Notify Palace Lord Yi, someone yelled. They seemed to want to ask Palace Lord Yi for help, but as soon as he finished speaking, a golden bolt of lightning struck his body. His entire body disappeared under the golden lightning, and his soul was scattered. He did not even have a corpse left. The group of cultivators looked at the Yi Imperial Palace in the distance, and their eyes were filled with scorn, along with a murderous aura. Notify the Yi Imperial Palace? There was no hurry. They had come to destroy the Yi Imperial Palace. Everything would end today. The Yi Imperial Palace and Ziwei Segmentum would become history. This was not Futian's era. He never had an era. He was only a talented junior who had fallen before he could fully rise up. So what if he was extremely talented? What could he change? They came today, representing the god of death. Boom! Countless huge palm prints fell from the sky. Nothing survived in their paths. Everyone was killed instantly under the attacks of the palm prints, and huge dents from the palms appeared on the ground. Everyone was fleeing wildly, but the moment that disaster came, they could only pray. The destructive blows kept raining down, as if the Reaper had come to this land. Who is wreaking havoc here? Beautiful divine light of the great path flowed in from the distance. It was the cultivators of the Ziwei Imperial Palace hurrying over. They were the ones who had joined the Ziwei Imperial Palace before. And now, Many of them had reached the pinnacle of the Runhuang Plain. Their hearts trembled after feeling the destructive intent too. These people were extremely frightening, but they must come to stop them. Of course, they had also notified the Yi Imperial Palace. As soon as they finished speaking, a destructive divine formation appeared in the sky. Then disparaging sword intent rained down, creating endless stabbing sounds. They did not even have the time to yell out in pain, before dying tragically under the attacks. They could not even think of resistance. Right now this place was like hell on earth. No one knew how many cultivators had died in an instant. This cruel and cold-blooded bloodshed had not happened on the ruins continent in many years, but it had happened here today. B/B many people felt despair. They could not even flee. But the strong cultivators did not seem to care about their lives. The murder was only done offhandedly. They traveled directly across the sky. Everywhere they passed, countless people were turned to dust. Their goal was the Yi Imperial Palace. These top figures had come for the Yi Imperial Palace to destroy the Yi Imperial Palace. Chapter 2781 One Step Too Slow. Chapter 2781 One Step Too Slow. Everyone retreat. A voice filled the atrium. No one could resist, so everyone began to do so. Clearly, the strong cultivators had realized that these people had come for blood, and they could not be stopped at all. This group of strong cultivators was frighteningly powerful. Anyone who wanted to stop them would be like trying to stop a mountain with a stick. They could not even take one hit, so they could only retreat. It would be enough if they could live on. At the same time as that voice, a divine sword appeared in the distance. It carried the supreme sword will, and transformed into various boundless and huge swords, coming down at the strong cultivators who had come to kill. There were strings of thunderous noises. The huge swords contained supreme might. The supreme swordlord's figure appeared outside the Yi Imperial Palace, coming out with a group of strong cultivators. They all had very uncomfortable expressions. They stared at the incoming strong cultivators in the distance, advancing with destruction. They saw countless beams of golden divine light sweeping through the void. They transformed into a golden divine sword. The sword did not contain any sword intent. It was only indestructible divine power, but it had transformed into a sword to kill, and then formed attacks. It was not a swordsman. But in that instant, all the divine swords were swept away and destroyed. The golden divine sword disintegrated the sword of the Supreme Sword Lord, making the Supreme Sword Lord's expression turn ugly. He stared at the group of advancing strong cultivators. They had become too strong. Emperor's might radiated subtly from their bodies, and divine power flowed around them. They were unstoppable as they tried to destroy the Yi Imperial Palace. The number of strong cultivators who had come out after the Supreme Sword Lord also had very uncomfortable expressions. They all saw that the Supreme Sword Lord could not stop them either. If this group attacked, they would probably not prevent them. Retreat. Go in. The Supreme Sword Lord saw the cold stare shoot over across the sky, and instantly made the decision. He ordered the retreat, making everyone return to the Yi Imperial Palace. Being outside was suicide. They were not the group's match, and would only be massacred. This was meaningless death. The strong cultivators who had come out all followed the order to retreat, and returned to the Yi Imperial Palace. Seeing them disappear, the cultivators in the distance did not mind either. Their eyes held some mockery as if staring at their prey. They had already reached this place, and those people still wanted to escape? They must all die. None of the strong cultivators of the Ziwei Imperial Palace should think of surviving. They would all be massacred, and the Ziwei Imperial Palace would be wiped out. The group of strong cultivators continued forward. In the sweep of an arm, who knew how many people lost their lives? They killed mindlessly, and everywhere they passed was turned to dust. It was as if people's lives were just like weeds to them, and the cultivators were like ants. This also made everyone feel despair. When faced with absolute power, they were indeed like ants. They did not even have the qualifications to resist. They could only watch as the Reaper descended, and then they would disappear from the world. Plus, the Supreme Sword Lord had come out and then retreated. Even they could not stop these people's bloodshed. The core figures of the Ziwei segmentum were gathered within the Yi Imperial Palace. We right now, The entire Yi Imperial Palace was shaken. The Supreme Swordlord's roar had woken all the cultivators with shock. Then they learned what had happened in the outside world. Strong enemies had come to invade the Yi Imperial Palace. Various figures shot into the sky. Strong auras of the Great Path radiated out, and their eyes were frigid. People had actually come to kill. No one had broken in since the Yi Imperial Palace had been constructed. This was the first time. But just this once put them against a huge catastrophe. Yi Futian was cultivating in isolation, but such a great matter naturally shocked him awake at once. A frightening will of the Great Path spread out in the sky above the Yi Imperial Palace. An illusory figure appeared in the sky. The Vajra region, Futian clan, Jiang clan, and other ancient god clans of the Divine Prefecture have allied and attacked us, the Supreme Swordlord announced. His voice spread across the entire Yi Imperial Palace, resonating through this land. They have committed massacres in the outer realms and are almost here. In cultivation, Yi Futian opened his eyes. His figure flashed, and he appeared in the sky, combining with the illusory figure. His expression did not look good. The ancient god clans had always been a danger. After the great emperor intent of the ancient god clans was awoken, they became extremely threatening. They had always been trying to cultivate faster than the others and get rid of the other. Before this, the ancient god clans had kept a low cover and never attacked him. But today, they had attacked together and were committing so much bloodshed. Yi Futian understood that the other side seemed to be very confident. Then, it was very likely they had taken a critical step and had experienced a transformation. That was why they dared to attack the Yi Imperial Palace so crazily. What step had they cultivated to? Boom. Following a considerable boom, the group of strong cultivators burst into the Yi Imperial Palace. It was indeed the alliance of the few ancient god clans of the Divine Prefecture in the past. This allied force had wanted to destroy them more than once. They had attacked the Ziwei Segmentum countless times before, but they all paid heavy prices. Tianyan City had especially been destroyed. The will of the Tianyan the Great had been wiped out, and the divine weapons had been taken. But the heritages of the other ancient god clans were still there, and they always hid their strongest trump card. They had fought before, but they had never been confident in destroying the other, and had always been waiting now. They seemed one step faster than him, and had come here to attack directly. A storm of the Great Path flowed in the atrium. Yi Futian's illusory figure seemed to appear in the sky. He stared at the incoming strong cultivators. The Lord of the Vajra realm, and countless other top cultivators, also looked up into the sky. Their eyes were like divine eyes, containing extremely sharp intents, along with a hint of disdainful air. They were like high and mighty gods who did not care for anything here, and were extremely scornful. Seeing those eyes, Yi Futian knew that these ancient figures probably had done what Tianyan the Great had done back then. They had controlled the physical bodies that they'd borrowed step by step. Back then, Tianyan the Great had possessed Wang Zhao's body, and finally became one with him. Wang Zhao had disappeared, and Tianyan the Great had been reborn. Now the few rulers of the ancient god clans had probably become the shells of the great emperors. Yi Futian, the Vajra realm's lord yelled. His eyes had turned golden, and were extremely sharp. Divine power seemed to flow in his eyes, and he stared scornfully at Yi Futian's body. It seems that in the end, you are still a bit slow, he said. After today, this star figure who had risen from the original realm will be eradicated from the world. Slow. Yi Futian could feel that gust of divine power, and could feel the strong confidence in the other's eyes. The great emperor had been revived, and attacked the Yi Imperial Palace to take his life. Several other great emperors had come at the same time too. They thought highly of him. You all were great emperors before too. How can you massacre the innocent? Yi Futian asked coldly. They were great emperors but massacring wildly. How could people of the outer realms resist the killing of a former great emperor? They are nothing but ants. In that era, not even one of 10 cultivators could survive. This is nothing, they said coldly. They did not care for the people's lives at all. To them, the masses were like ants. Chapter 2782 Crisis. Chapter 2782 Crisis. So, you'll even possess and devour your own juniors? Yi Futian's eyes were cold. These great emperors disrespected the masses. It is their honor to be able to combine with our consciousnesses, the Vajra realm lord said coldly. Supported by the divine power, his entire aura had changed drastically and was completely different from the original Vajra realm lord. It was like Wang Xiao after being possessed by Tianyin the Great. At this time, another figure appeared in the sky. It was Shi Qiao. She was also from an ancient god clan, and had some similarities. She looked at the group in the lower sky and said coldly, "Since you all have stepped onto this path, as the Buddha of Destiny said, the age of gods will appear. You all will have the chance to recover your emperor position. You're no longer your original self, so why remain obsessed with the past rivalries?" They all gazed at Shi Qiao. They knew that Shi Qiao was a bit special too, like them. After all, they had all inherited the forces of the ancient god clans. If he is only an ordinary person, then he is an ant in my eyes. I would not lower myself to make this trip. You also said that I will recover my emperor position in the future. How can I leave such a threat here? They were a bit worried because of how extraordinary Yi Futian was. They worried that Yi Futian would enter the great emperor plane one day, becoming their threat. After all, it was incredibly difficult for them to come back to life. They had gone through a long passage of time for the change in the world to finally come and give them a chance to return to the world and the past. They were not like Tianyin the Great. It seems that the fallen gods of the past have fear in their hearts, Yi Futian said coldly, with hints of mockery. These figures who had once been great emperors feared him, and thus came to kill him. Say whatever you want. Today, all of this will cease to exist, the other party replied indifferently. They were dismissive of Yi Futian's words. It should not have been so fast. Furrowing her brows, Shi Qiao said, "How did you all do it?" She was like these people. Naturally, she knew some things. What methods did you all take to reach this step? Shi Qiao continued to ask. Hearing Shi Qiao's words, Yi Futian also had a surprised expression. Then he seemed to think of something and asked, "You all went to the human realm?" Naturally, he knew about that matter too. Of course, he also remembered how the human ancestor had sent someone to invite him before. At that time, they had guessed that the human realm might convince some top cultivators of the divine prefecture to join them. Then these big ancient god clans may very well be among them. Plus, these ancient god clans all had former great emperors. The human ancestors' promise would be the most tempting and attractive to them. A sharp flash of murderous intent appeared in the eyes of the Vajra realm lord. While divine power surged, he raised his hands and pointed straight up at Shi Qiao in the sky. The finger penetrated the skies, and a frightening beam of golden light appeared in the void, going towards Shi Qiao instantly. Boom! A blur flashed by, and Yi Futian's figure appeared, taking Shi Qiao away from her original spot. The frightening divine power stabbed into the void, and it was like a hole opened up in the heavens penetrated by the divine power. "Step back," Yi Futian said. Shi Qiao's situation was the same as the other side before, but she was no longer their match. These people had already been possessed and completed a critical transformation. Yi Futian was unclear about how strong they were now, but since they dared to charge into the Yi Imperial Palace, they were very confident they could kill them. "Everyone step back," Yi Futian said. Instantly many people retreated. They all understood that they would not do much in this battle. The vast Yi Imperial Palace became extremely depressed. Even though this place was huge, it did not mean anything for strong cultivators of this level. Their attacks could cover it directly. Yi Futian had a thought, and instantly, frightening will of the emperor flooded out. Green divine light shone in the heavens. At the same time, countless runes appeared in the sky above the Yi Imperial Palace. It was like a curtain of light. These runes were all runes of the Sword Way, containing immense swordsmanship chi. At the same time, an emperor-level divine sword hovered at the peak of the Yi Imperial Palace, pulsing with immense sword will. Yi Futian's figure seemed to have become one with the world here. His will became the will of the land. The runes in the heavens transformed into the sharpest divine swords, and quickly unified into a huge divine sword. Then Yi Futian pointed down the sky. The divine sword instantly stabbed down murderously, carrying the immense will of the sword. Poof! The sharp sound ripped apart the void. The frightening divine sword ignored the distance in the space, and pierced down murderously, stabbing toward the Vajra realm lord. This sword attack was extremely shocking. It broke apart the land like a sword that would destroy the world. It was aggressive and domineering, tearing apart the space. Countless beams of sword will buried that portion of the sky. Emperor weapon divine formation. The strong cultivators of the ancient god clans looked up into the sky. The great emperors were all stunned while looking at the incoming sword. As expected, it was correct for them to have not come in the past. If they had attacked here before, they probably would not be able to fend off such a divine sword attack. A storm of divine power suddenly swept up around the Vajra realm lord. In an instant, unsurmountable divine might enveloped the land and sky. With his body as the core, the Vajra realm's divine power converged into a frightening curtain of light. There seemed to be a god behind him. The terrifying storm of divine power gathered, and the ancient god of the Vajra realm pointed forward. It was like a true heavenly god's point. Countless beams of finger light shone forth, and they were all created from the Vajra realm's divine power. And the pointed finger went straight towards the frighteningly intense, incoming divine sword. The Vajra realm lord did not avoid it, and faced the sword attack squarely. For his current state, any being below the great emperor plane were like ants. He did not care. Even if a true great emperor released emperor weapons and divine formations, why would he care? The two attacks clashed together, and a muffled sound was emitted from the entire Yi imperial palace. It was as if the space was being ripped apart as the destructive windstorm swept through the place. The Vajra realm's divine power was an indestructible and sharp divine power. Even when it crashed against the huge sword, it still stabbed through directly. The huge divine sword broke bit by bit from the center and crumbled. After the divine sword was destroyed, the divine power of the Vajra realm was still there. When the destructive windstorm scattered, Yi Futian's eyes grew extremely grave. He stared down from the sky. He could mostly get a feel of the other party's abilities from this attack. It was only one person, but he was already this strong, while there were countless figures of this level on the other side. How could he counter them? The Vajra realm lord's eyes held some shades of mockery. They had killed all the way here, sweeping all of the beings, but he actually was not as impatient now. He kind of felt bad about killing a cultivator like Yi Futian, who was qualified to become a great emperor. Chapter 2783 Die with Honor? Chapter 2783 Die with Honor? Yi Futian, I can give you a way to survive. Will you choose it? The Vajra realm lord asked. His voice held penetrative power, and the cultivators of the Yi imperial palace felt their eardrums hurt. The former great emperor had combined with the Vajra realm lord, becoming one. He had recovered his divine power, and though he still had not recovered to his prime, he was already under the emperor plane. Even his voice contained divine power. The people of the Yi imperial palace could feel it. They felt hopeless and looked up at Yi Futian in the sky. Perhaps they would face unprecedented danger today. Would they be able to reverse the tides this time? A way to survive. Yi Futian looked at the other. He understood clearly that there was only one path to resolving this under the circumstances. Everyone under the great emperor plane were ants. He must kowtow under the other's foot, accept the other's control, and give up everything. This is what the other wanted. In reality, they had lost the ability to relieve the situation after the storm that year. One party had to be destroyed. However, he seemed to indeed be one step slower. The other had reached the next level one step sooner, even though this might have been because of the human ancestor. But the process was not necessary. It was the result that was important. While the Vajra realm lord spoke, a boundless divine formation appeared in the sky. The divine formation contained boundless and infinite sword will as if it was the power of divine punishment. Yi Futian took a look. It was another reincarnated great emperor of the ancient god clan preparing to attack. He had a thought, and a horrifying spatial storm appeared in the sky. The rules in this place surged, and countless swallowing spaces appeared in the vast space. In addition, a huge swallowing wheel appeared. It was like a black hole that could swallow up everything in the world. Very strong rules of space flooded outside of this black hole storm. In the sky, it was as if the will of the great emperor was awakening. This land originally had a will of the great emperor. This had once been where the Maharaja of the 8 legions had been located. Futian's eyes changed. His body melted into that space, disappearing into the black hole. This windstorm flooded down the sky. The black hole swallowed everything in the world, including the force of the great path, causing many of the sword will to disappear after being swept into the black hole. Interesting. The Vajra realm lord looked up into the sky. His golden eyes held divine power, and were extremely sharp. The will of the Maharaja from the ancient 8 legions. Unfortunately, this does not exist. As soon as he finished speaking, a frightening will shot into the heavens, causing that horrifying swallowing storm in the sky to ripple. The other reincarnated great emperors also released their wills. The entire Yi imperial palace was enveloped by the wills of these great emperors, making people feel truly suffocating pressure. Every will was of the great emperor level. Even though these great emperors had not returned to their peak, they had already awoken again and returned. It was the true will of the great emperor. Just as the other had said, if King Maharaja had come back to life, he would naturally be able to force back their will. But Maharaja did not exist anymore while they had indeed returned. Boom! The silhouette of the Vajra realm's ancient god raised a hand and pointed at the sky. In an instant, the divine power of the Vajra realm transformed into various sharp blades that penetrated the void. The blades did not fly out of his hand. Instead, it crossed through the void and stabbed into the black hole storm that could swallow everything. The various sharp blades came from an ancient god's hand and could stab through the spatial storm directly. The black hole storm swallowed it up, but the other end was still in the hand of the ancient god. Divine power burst forth, flooding wildly into the black hole storm, wanting to rip the black hole storm apart. The black hole storms rolled and thundered as if they were about to collapse. At the same time, the force of divine punishment transformed by the countless divine swords also stabbed into the black hole storm. These ancient gods wanted to make the black hole storm collapse forcefully. Boom, boom, boom. Many thunderous sounds shook the sky and land. The windstorms that had appeared above the Yi imperial palace were collapsing simultaneously, getting ruined and destroyed. Billions of divine swords flew out at once, racing towards Yi Futian. Suddenly, a very strong beam of the sword will appeared in the sky. 4 figures appeared at the same time. The 4 great swordsmen were the supreme sword lord, Yi Wuxian, Yaya and swordsmaster of Lihan. Of course, the supreme sword lord was the leader, while Yi Wuxian and the other swordsmen were support. They released the emperor-level will that they comprehended that year, and activated the emperor-level divine weapon. With the supreme sword lord as the main sword formation leader, a massive divine sword formation appeared above the windstorm. The 2 forces of sword will crashed wildly against each other, collapsing in the void and appending the world. Oomph! There was a cold huff, and then a Hautian great palm seal appeared in the sky. It passed through the broken sword will directly and slammed into the supreme sword lord and the others in the sky. B/B, they pushed the huge sword to crash against it. But the moment that the Hautian divine power was released, it already crushed everything. The great palm seal transformed into the sky, representing the will of Hautian. It was incomparable. Boom! With a massive crash, the emperor-level divine sword fell down and finally caused the Hautian great palm seal to shake. However, the emperor-level divine sword was still sent flying back. The supreme sword lord and other strong cultivators were sent flying too. They grunted, and fresh blood trickled out of their mouths. They had not been hit directly. It was the divine power contained in the will of Hautian that had hurt them. Insects are trying to shake a tree, the leader of the Hautian clan said. He had once been Hautian the Great. One could imagine how incredibly strong he had been before to name himself after Hautian, the vast heavens. He represented the will of Hautian. The divine power that he cultivated was also the divine power of Hautian. Now, even though he had not returned fully, he could already release his will and divine power at the same time. How could these people counter him, with only one emperor-level weapon? He could sweep away everything by himself, and kill into the Yi imperial palace. And yet they had all come together. Yi Futian glanced at the Supreme Sword Lord and the others. He felt some despair. Naturally, he also thought that these people were already returning. Even though they had not become emperors directly after returning, they were already near great emperors. These near great emperors were not the same as other near deity cultivators. Even if the other near deity cultivators had very detailed and strong cultivations, they had not touched the ultimate power yet. But these people had felt it before. They had once been true great emperors. Yi Futian, it is still your honor to die here today, the Haotian clan leader announced, his voice reverberating the sky. It was still Yi Futian's honor to die because he would die in their hands. Countless great emperors had allied today to kill Yi Futian. As the descendant of a great emperor and heir of many great emperors, you aren't willing to surrender. Then, today I will bestow upon you an honored death. You may rest in peace, the Vajra realm leader said. His voice was extremely cold and arrogant. Bestowing death upon Yi Futian was his honor. It was only because they were high and mighty great emperors. Merely dying in their hands was an honor, let alone all of them descending together to kill Yi Futian. No one else in the divine prefecture would have this honor. Killing him was his own honor. What kind of arrogance was this? What kind of mockery was this? But these people had once been great emperors. Right now, all the strong cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace only felt suffocating pressure. The repressive aura shrouded everyone. It was not only Yi Futian today. The group of great emperors saw everyone's lives as nothing. Everything under the great emperor plane were mere ants. If Yi Futian lost, then everyone would die here today. The other party would not let anyone go. The Yi Imperial Palace was a whole. At this moment, Yi Futian's body entered the upper sky. His chi surged wildly within him, flowing towards the outer world. Emerald green divine light from his life palace, combined with the will of the world. His own will incorporated into the world too. His cultivation had improved his abilities significantly these past few years. He was incomparable to the past and could not be spoken of in the same way. But even so, he was not facing the controllers of ancient god clans anymore. Instead, they were returned great emperors. Plus, it was not only one. Under these circumstances, he would only have a sliver of chance by borrowing the will of ancient great emperors and fully combine with the will of Maharaja that was contained in the relics. As if sensing something, the group of strong cultivators looked up into the sky. There was scorn in their eyes. Yi Futian still had not given up and wanted to turn the tides. He was dreaming. The people are always so delusional. They're already hopeless, but they still hold on to the fantasy. It's just the struggle before death. What meaning is there for an ant struggle? The Haotian clan leader said loudly. His voice was indifferent and held a lofty feeling. He did not respect Yi Futian at all. He was no longer the controller of the Haotian clan. The strong cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace did not think that the other party was being cocky when they heard this voice. Instead, the voice seemed solemn and grave, as if stating a fact. That was the voice of a great emperor, and it was accompanied by a divine might. The masses were ants, while they were the rulers of the world. What meaning was there for an ant struggle? Perhaps it was because Yi Futian was the first person they wanted to kill after returning. Or maybe he was the first opponent. So they were a bit more talkative. Even though they did not truly see Yi Futian as an opponent, they still gave Yi Futian some respect. In their eyes, they had come personally to kill Yi Futian, and several had come together. This was already respect. It was Yi Futian's honor. He could die with honor. Die, a calm voice said. It was a distant tone, as if announcing the result that had already been determined. In the sky, the Haotian might shrouded the land. A face appeared above his body. It seemed to represent Haotian. This face then transformed into a huge figure, like a heavenly deity. It raised a hand and slammed down at the lower sky. Countless Haotian great palm seals abruptly shot down. The ground shattered, and everything was about to be destroyed. The palm seals covered the entire Yi Imperial Palace. Everything was about to be destroyed. Chapter 2784 Divine War. Chapter 2784 Divine War. The falling Haotian great palm seals contained Haotian divine power and were abominable. As soon as the palm seals appeared, The cultivators in the entire Yi imperial palace felt a divine might. It was the weight of Futian. It felt suffocating, and their blood thundered as if their bodies were about to implode. They could not imagine what would happen if they were hit by the divine power within the Great Palm Seal. They could not withstand the divine print of Futian at all. Just then, a brilliant beam of divine light lit up throughout the entire Yi imperial palace. The golden divine light swept by, transforming into an incredible sheet of light. At the same time, divine music sounded, filling the sky. A group of figures appeared in the sky above the Yi imperial palace. This group of strong cultivators had directly formed a divine formation, using their flesh bodies to create the formation. They stood in different directions of the Yi imperial palace, and the silhouette of the war god appeared behind their bodies, looming over the land. The cultivators of the Lost Clan, the people of the Yi imperial palace, all looked up to the sky. The newcomers were the strong cultivators of the Lost Clan. Headed by the elders of the Lost Clan, the 360 Lost Clan cultivators formed this super war formation. Most of the people were for aid, while the truly strong cultivators were those at the elder level. This time, all the elders had come out. The strong cultivators of the Lost Clan, who had not gotten involved with matters, seemed incredibly ancient, but they had stepped out this time too. This was not only the matter of the Ziwei Imperial Palace, but it also pertained to the Lost Clan. The current Yi Imperial Palace included the Ziwei Imperial Palace, West Imperial Palace, and the Lost Clan. If one flourished, all flourished. If one was ruined, all were ruined. Divine light shimmered subtly in that strong war formation. It was supposed by ancient emperor-level weapons, and divine power surged. It covered the sky and sun, blocking the sky above the Yi Imperial Palace. The Futian divine palm seals rained down, emitting muffled thunders, as if the world was about to break apart. The curtain of divine light cracked immediately and broke apart. But then the ancient figures who'd appeared pushed up the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The thunderous noises continued, streaming out endlessly. The leader of the Futian clan stood high in the sky and gazed at the cultivators of the Lost Clan with his divine eyes. It was as expected of an ancient clan. They formed a battle formation with their flesh and did not fear death. However, all effort was futile. The Lost Clan was only a clan abandoned by the deities. How could they resist a true deity? The godlike bodies broke apart one by one, and the ancient god's silhouette was crumbling. All cultivators of the Lost Clan withstood the immense pressure of divine power. Under the reverberations of the divine power, many strong Lost Clan cultivators under the formation spat out blood, and their bodies fell down the sky. They could not take it anymore and died on the spot. The elders of the Lost Clan were withstanding most of the pressure, but their cultivations were stronger. The Lost Clan cultivators who had not gone through the tribulations, yet were still too weak. They could not take it, and deaths kept occurring. Plus, as the Futian divine power continued attacking, some of the Lost Clan elders also started spitting out blood. It was like cracks had appeared in their bodies, and they could die on the spot at any time. Seeing this situation, the Supreme Sword Lord and his group used the divine sword to attack. Blind Tai, Fong Siyuan, and the others all contributed their weapons, attacking up the sky. Shi Qiyao, Gu Donglu, and all other strong cultivators who could fight, such as those who had inherited emperor weapons, all started attacking. Even Xia Qingyuan went up to the sky. Her cultivation was only at the peak of the Runhuang Plain, but she had inherited a great emperor's heritage. She activated the Lotus of Life, causing a sacred lotus to appear in the sky. It kept enlarging, and the flower petals bloomed. She went towards the group in the sky, and the intent of life flowed out continuously. Even so, people still kept getting injured, and were hurled down from the sky. It was incredibly tragic. At that time, there was a strange commotion in the sky. Yi Futian's entire body had disappeared, becoming one with the will of the world. A huge godly silhouette of Maharaga appeared. There were many pythons hanging from its body. The frightening but ancient heavenly deity, formed by Maharaga, opened his bloody maw, and started devouring the Vajra realm lord, and other cultivators. His big mouth swallowed everything, covering the entire sky. With one move, it swallowed up that sky, causing all those figures to disappear. Humph. A cold huff came from within the silhouette of Maharaga. Then intense divine light burst out of it. The light was brilliant, and divine power was suffused in it. There was a horrifying boom that kept shaking the silhouette of Maharaga. Bang! After an intense explosive sound, the godly silhouette collapsed. The group of cultivators appeared in the sky. Those former great emperors were there. So what if they had gotten devoured? Divine power wrapped around them all and could not hurt them. But the moment they reappeared, another huge face appeared in the sky. It was still Maharaga's face. He let out a huge roar. The angry roar of an ancient god caused the souls of many cultivators to tremble. Some of the enemy cultivators of the ancient god clans collapsed directly and died on the spot, getting killed by the reverberations. This roar contained the will of the great emperor. This scene made the great emperors a bit shocked. Under these circumstances, their people could still get killed directly by Futian. This intensified the murderous intent in their eyes. It was not great for this kind of thing to happen before them, even though they did not care about those people's lives, despite them being their descendants. What they cared about was that even ants could fight back. This upset them greatly. At the same time, shocking divine power descended. A huge godly silhouette of Maharaga, wielding a divine ruler, hacked down directly. This ruler covered the sky and sun, and the atrium was instantly filled with ruler silhouettes. Each ruler contained immense power. The sky became very heavy, as if the world would collapse if this ruler fell down. Divine power. The great emperors went up higher. Divine power flooded into a curtain of light, but when the divine ruler arrived, the curtain of light was shattered. The ruler silhouettes that filled the sky continued raining down at them, actually making them feel a bit of pressure. The ants in their eyes made them feel pressure. This scene made them furrow their brows, and they all raised their hands to attack. The Vajra Realm Divine Print and Futian Great Palm Seal were sent out. When the sky full of ruler silhouettes rained down, the Vajra Realm Divine Print and Futian Great Palm Seal were shattered too. Attacks from Maharaga in the sky did not stop. Supported by divine power, emerald green divine light filled the boundless sky and land. The divine ruler continued to dance, attacking once again. This blow shook the sky. The entire Yi Imperial Palace was shaking. This attack was incomparable. Chapter 2785 Hopeless Situation. Chapter 2785 Hopeless Situation. Humph. There was a cold humph, and the mountain lord of the infinite mountains waved his hand. Instantly, infinite divine swords attacked murderously, clashing against the divine ruler silhouettes filling the sky. The divine sword seemed endless, and each sword contained immense sword will. The endless stream of attacks crashed against the divine ruler silhouettes, filling the sky, and blocked the incoming divine rulers. Now the mountain lord of the infinite mountains was Wuxia the Great. The divine power that he had created was the infinite divine power. Everything in the world would begin to change physically once they reached a certain number, while infinite meant that it was never-ending. He could casually lift a finger, and the sword would become an infinite stream of swords. The beam of sword will would become infinite sword will without an end. If you wanted to destroy infinity, you needed a strong enough attack to destroy the infinite divine power instantly. If your explosive force weren't strong enough, you would not get another chance. He borrowed the will of Maharaga, and the power of the divine ruler's attack is already close to your level. The divine power contained in this divine ruler is not the ordinary path. It's like the most primitive force, the leader of the ancient Jiang clan said, after standing quietly the entire time. Naturally, he was no longer his original self anymore. It was the consciousness of Heavenly Emperor Jiang, controlling the body of this cultivator. As a former great emperor, he could feel how extraordinary Yi Futian's divine power was. Yi Futian's opportunity was not simple. Yes, he received this item from House Karura. It's the divine item to restrain the demonic lord, and may contain the power of the former heavenly path. It might not be himself. He's quite lucky, Yuanshi the Great said. His voice was indifferent, but his eyes shone with a different kind of light. Could they receive such a divine item after killing Yi Futian? However, they had 5 strong figures. There wouldn't be enough to go around. Even though it's not his power, It is already extraordinary that he can combine with the Force and use it for himself. If this boy does not die, he will have a chance to step onto the great path and path of the emperors under the changing circumstances, Heavenly Emperor Jiang said. He thought highly of Yi Futian. But thinking highly of Yi Futian did not affect his decision to kill him. It was because of Yi Futian's talent that he must be destroyed. If he stepped onto the path of the emperors in the future, he would pose a threat to them. If not for their existing rivalries, he would not be willing to kill such a talented figure. It was just a pity that he was destined to die. No one could change this result. Since 6th Emperor would not step in this time, no one would save Yi Futian, and 6th Emperor would probably not interfere. As they spoke, another attack fell. The huge body of Maharaga hefted the divine ruler and attacked again. It was extremely aggressive, and this blow was even more powerful and unstoppable. When this attack fell, it penetrated Wuliang the Great's attack instantly. The infinite divine power was broken through. This shocked all of the great emperors. This divine ruler's attack had a different force from the great path. Other than the terrifyingly strong force, it seemed also to have the penetrative abilities of the great path of space. It had penetrated the infinite divine power in an instant. Although Wuliang the Great had been careless, this kind of attack was enough to be intimidating. The extremely aggressive attacks kept raining down on them, but a beautiful spatial curtain of light hung over the place where the cultivators stood in the lower sky. The divine ruler's attacks seemed to sink into the void when it hit the curtain. The spatial curtain of light rippled and showed no other reaction. It was Heavenly Emperor Jiang. "It's time to end," Heavenly Emperor Jiang said. He raised a hand and pointed into the sky. Instantly, divine light radiated through the vast sky. Divine power flooded out, rushing into the clouds. Bang! There was a muffled sound in the atrium. In that instant, it was like the entire land was covered by this divine power, and was instantly shackled. The roaring and surging windstorm fell silent instantly, and stopped its commotion. The cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace all halted, and looked up into the sky. They saw countless golden runes appear in the storm that had been surging earlier. All the rune light made from the divine power had shackled the space, turning it into a divine formation that sealed it. It contained incredible spatial force. The hearts of all the strong cultivators beat quickly. They looked towards Heavenly Emperor Jiang again. He pointed at the sky, and a straight light beam appeared between him and the upper space. Divine power poured crazily into the air. This was Heavenly Emperor Jiang's divine power. It sealed Maharaga's violent intent with the unsurmountable spatial divine power. Yi Futian's consciousness was naturally sealed within too. His consciousness had already been combined with the land. This was why he could feel the restrictive divine power even more clearly. Break! Haotian the Great sent the Haotian divine print against the body of Maharaga that had been attacking them. Instantly, there was a muffled sound in the void. Maharaga's body shattered. However, Maharaga's body did not exist, so it did not truly threaten Yi Futian. What threatened him was the force in the upper space. At this time, the storm in the atrium started roaring again, as if it would break free from the restraint. This surprised Heavenly Emperor Jiang. Could it break free from the shackles of his divine power? The law within this divine ruler was indeed extraordinary. But so what? How could human power change the intent of a heavenly emperor? Divine light gathered, and countless beams of divine power solidified into a long halberd. Heavenly Emperor Jiang held the divine halberd, and his figure flashed, disappearing from the spot. The next moment, the divine halberd formed by divine power hacked down on the center of the divine formation. The divine power in the formation started to explode madly in an instant. The destructive divine power went wild, destroying everything. The storm formed by the will of Maharaga was getting destroyed wildly. Even though the 5 great emperors had attacked many times since arriving, it was the first time they attacked with their divine weapon like Heavenly Emperor Jiang. This blow split the atrium and ripped the space. There was a muffled sound. The cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace saw many cracks appear. Fresh blood spattered out of one place. It looked gruesome. Then a figure appeared in that area. It was Yi Futian. Seeing this scene, The hearts of the Yi Imperial Palace cultivators dropped. Their pallor was white as paper. After all, Yi Futian was not a great emperor. He could only borrow the will of Maharaja, while the other party was a true reincarnated great emperor, and returned for this battle. How strong was he? The Yi Imperial Palace had not faced this kind of crisis since its establishment. It could be said to be a fatal catastrophe with no way of turning the tides. 5 great emperors from ancient times had returned. No one could counter them. They had all worked hard on cultivating in the past few years, but they could only study the will of the great emperor to improve themselves. And right now they were faced with actual great emperors. Chapter 2786 Despair. Chapter 2786 Despair. It's over. Heavenly Emperor Jiang said in a low voice. The divine halberd flew out of his hand, stabbing straight into the sky. The distance had no effect as it went straight toward Yi Futian's true body. Bang! The divine halberd was stopped with a huge bang. A frightening gust of battle will exploded violently. It was the will of the great emperor. A woman clothed in white appeared before Yi Futian. Ling Long had taken out the divine sword that controlled the divine formation, and made a frightening thrust. It crashed against the divine halberd, blocking the fatal blow. A divine body formed by the will. Heavenly Emperor Jiang looked up at Ling Long, and naturally sensed that the other was materialized by the pure will of Tianshan. The battle intent wrapped around her body was extremely shocking. Just then, endless sword will appeared in the sky. The countless divine swords rained down. Ling Long hefted the divine sword and pressed down on the lower sky. A huge sword instantly appeared in the sky. It carried horrifying battle intent as it broke through the sky, ripping the space. It was the heaven-slaying divine sword. BN/B. Why would Heavenly Emperor Jiang care? He reached out his hand, and the divine halberd returned. Then his body went up the sky, stabbing with the divine halberd. A beam of spatial divine light appeared in the sky, ripping the space. A straight space passage appeared in the sky. It crashed against the heaven-slaying divine sword, causing cracks to appear in the divine sword. It broke from the center. At the same time, the Tianshan of the Vyajra realm also moved. His eyes glanced at Yi Futian. These people were quite strong. They had already started attacking seriously, but they still had not killed Yi Futian. His figure flashed upward, and divine power surged. At this time, a sheet of rain fell on him. He paused and saw Shi Qiao charging over with the raindrop divine sword. As soon as the sword was out, the sky started raining. Countless raindrops fell, and each drop contained sword will that could penetrate everything the raindrops joined into thread, transforming into continuous sword will, and attacked the great emperor of the Vajra realm. However, the other's eyes had turned golden, and carried some hints of scorn. He was dismissive. Raising a hand, the Vajra realm divine power attacked as a pointing finger, crashing directly into the raindrop divine sword. At this moment 2 extremely sharp wills were clashing squarely. The great emperor of the Vajra realm felt cracks appear in his finger after the continuous attacks from the sword will, getting penetrated bit by bit. However, the strong attack also sent the raindrop divine sword and Shi Qiao's body flying out, the will of the Western Emperor. The great emperor of the Vajra realm looked at that divine sword. It contained the will of the Western Emperor. Just like the 5 of them, the Western Emperor had been an ancient great emperor. His will was undying, and survived in the world in another form. This was why it could have cracked his finger earlier. But this was not enough at all. His entire body was dazzling. The Vajra realm divine power wrapped around his body, letting the countless raindrops fall on him, because it could not damage his defenses at all. It did not pose a threat. He took a step forward, and directly disappeared from the spot. He pointed, and the Vajra realm divine power started exploding wildly. Countless beams of finger light penetrated the air, destroying everything. Shi Qiao waved her raindrop divine sword, but could not fend off the great emperor's finger. There were many poofs, and then Shi Qiao let out a muffled grunt. Her body was sent flying, and her clothes were red with blood. Her long dress had turned bloody. She could not stop the attacks. The Vajra realm divine power was still pointed at her. It was about to penetrate and destroy her entirely, But another woman's figure appeared beside Shi Qiyao. It was actually Hua Jiyu. The space seemed to freeze where she stood. Her eyes had become extremely demonic, and a frightening spiritual will controlled this place. It weakened the Vajra realm's force a little. The Tianshan of the Vajra realm looked at her after seeing this scene. Then a horrifying burst of the will of Tianshan descended. It was like there was an extremely aggressive will in the void that destroyed her spiritual abilities. The divine finger did not stop. It even sped up to kill the two. Careful, Lord Chen said. His body appeared in that space and starry light flowed about. It was transformed into a sealed spatial world. The divine power hit the curtain of starry light, causing Lord Chen to grunt. The number of people was meaningless when faced with absolute strength. Haotian the Great huffed coldly. They were gradually losing their patience. He slapped his hand in the air, and the stars were all obliterated. Lord Chen and the others were sent flying out. They spat out fresh blood, and their faces were ghastly. They were all feeling despair. The others were too strong. If it was only one or two great emperors, they might still be able to struggle. If they all worked together, they could have a chance in a battle. But 5 great emperors had returned, and they were unstoppable. Haotian the Great prepared to continue attacking. An extremely sharp and domineering will spread in the sky. He lifted his head slightly, and saw a blind man wielding a divine hammer. He attacked from the heavens, and when the hammer fell, the world let out a muffled sound. It was enough to shatter the void. You want to die? Haotian the Great shot up straightly into the sky. He was feeling impatient. These people kept attacking, making it so that they had not killed Yi Futian yet. He was a bit angered. His body shot into the clouds and entered the terrifying shockwaves. However, an absolute domain formed around his body. He was covered in the divine power and will of Haotian, and was untouchable. The sky tremor attacked continuously, and the destructive blows came without a stop. This was a bit of an obstacle for Haotian the Great. The Haotian divine power burst from his body, and he raised a hand toward the sky, releasing the Haotian divine seal. It covered the sky and sun, going up against the tide. Everything in its path was disintegrated and turned to dust. The sky tremor shockwaves were also shot down. Then the Haotian divine print crashed against the sky tremor. There was a string of muffled sounds. The sky tremor flew out of Blind Tai's hands and flew up the sky. At the same time, Blind Tai's body was sent flying out. His internal organs were all shattered. He spat out blood, and his face was colorless. Father! Tai too called out, feeling despair. He hated his inabilities. The only ones who could make some counterattacks on this battlefield were Yi Futian and Ling Long. However, they were faced with 5 great emperors. This was such a hopeless situation. They did not see any sliver of hope. Palace Lord, please leave quickly. They heard someone yell to Yi Futian. It was Lord Chen's voice. He was asking Yi Futian to leave. Yi Futian was skilled in celerity and had supernatural abilities. If he wanted to escape, there was a chance that he could make it. However, the enemies were attacking the Yi Imperial Palace, and everyone was in there. Yi Futian would not want to leave under the circumstances. They could only persuade Yi Futian to leave. Palace Lord. The voices rose up in waves. They were actually all pleading to Yi Futian to leave with anticipation. They would not escape from such a hopeless situation, so they would continue fighting even if the entire army were wiped out. They would die here. There would only be hope for revenge if Yi Futian left. One could see how much despair the people of the Yi Imperial Palace felt for them to ask Yi Futian to flee. Chapter 2787 Can he escape? Chapter 2787 Can he escape? Yi Futian used his mind, and then his body disappeared from the spot. It seemed that he was prepared to escape. This kind of decisiveness surprised all of the 5 great emperors. Would Yi Futian really escape without caring for these people's lives? This did not suit Yi Futian's personality. Otherwise, he could have done this in the Ziwei segmentum back then. It was clear that Yi Futian wanted to use his escape to make them chase after him, and give the cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace more opportunities to survive. Escape? Can you escape? They sneered coldly. There were 5 great emperors here. And Yi Futian still wanted to escape? So what if he could use celerity? In an instant, Yi Futian's figure appeared again in the void. The Vajra realm divine power had formed a domain in the atrium that sealed the Yi imperial palace. Beautiful divine light lit up in the surrounding skies. This was the Vajra domain. Celerity could cross any distance, but it could not forcefully open up a domain. This territory had been sealed off. If Yi Futian wanted to use celerity to break free and escape, he would have to destroy the domain. With a straight backside, Yi Futian went further up. He transformed into a bolt of lightning. His divine body seemed to be advancing as a sword, and it hit the Vajra domain directly. There was a muffled sound, and the Vajra domain cracked, but it did not shatter. The Vajra realm great emperor glanced at Yi Futian and stepped forward. He ignored Shi Qiyao, who wanted to stop him. She was not his match. Shi Qiyao looked up at the atrium. Yi Futian was still attacking the Vajra domain. But then the Vajra realm great emperor arrived. He pointed forward without making any other actions, and was about to kill Yi Futian. Yi Futian's entire body shone brilliantly. The green divine light wrapped around him. He pushed a divine sword downward to counter the force of the finger. But then the divine sword shattered and broke apart from the center. The Vajra realm divine power was indestructible and unbreachable. It passed through the divine sword directly, stabbing Yi Futian's body. That instant, Yi Futian still let out a grunt even though he had formed a divine body. The divine power penetrated his own divine power, rushing into Yi Futian's body. With a poof, his body disappeared from the spot and reappeared elsewhere. But he still spat out a mouthful of blood. You are immortal, and yet you dream of shaking the gods. The Vajra realm great emperor spoke indifferently. His cold voice filled the sky. The voice of a great emperor could echo throughout the world, like the great path rules. It caused countless people's hearts to pulse and reverberate in their eardrums. A mortal who dreamed of shaking the gods was delusional. These words were filled with insufferable arrogance. The Vajra realm divine power started flowing through his body. Countless beams of golden divine light circled his body, as if he was transforming into a true deity. Even though he had not reached his peak since returning, he was still a returned great emperor. How could a mortal be his match? No one could stop him. All of those who could fight couldn't even take a single hit. They could not stop the attacks of the 5 great emperors, even Ling Long, who was the strongest. Seeing this scene, the Yi imperial palace sank into the emotion of despair. The strong cultivators from the 5 ancient god clans watched everything from the back. Their eyes scanned the cultivators of the Yi imperial palace. This result had already been determined when Yi Futian became their enemy back then. Their gods had returned, and the ancient god clans would be revived, returning to the brilliance of the ancient times. Yi Futian was their stepping stone, and the first being they would wipe out. The 5 ancient god clans would step over Yi Futian's corpse to announce their return. In the current era, the 6 emperors were already in tacit agreement that the age of gods had arrived. Then, there would not be any other concerns. In this despair, some of the juniors actually had tears in their eyes. It was their first time being in such a hopeless situation. Seeing their god, Yi Futian repressed like this. 5 great emperors had come for blood. Who could fight them? Shi Qiyao looked up at the sky. A terrifying aura rushed out of her body. It was like her body was burning. Strands of light flooded into the raindrop divine sword. Her expression turned painful, and her body quivered. Her body, divine soul, and that raindrop divine sword started resonating and combining with each other. An even stronger sword will float in the raindrop divine sword. Divine light flowed as if divine power was extending out of the divine sword. Some power was awakening within the divine sword. Oh! Yuanshu the Great looked in the direction of Shi Qiyao. They were extremely sensitive, and naturally sensed the changes in Shi Qiyao's body. She was evolving. Her raindrop divine sword was also evolving. Shi Qiyao was also from an ancient god clan. She had come from the West Imperial Palace, and had an ancient god's heritage. This was a similarity between them. Plus, Shi Qiyao was known as the cultivator most suited for the West Emperor's heritage. This rumor had been learned from years ago. Shi Qiyao had also been set as the goddess of the West Imperial Palace long ago, and would rule the palace in the future. Her compatibility for the West Emperor's heritage surpassed that of any cultivator of the West Imperial Palace in the past. As ancient gods, they naturally understood what this meant. Especially now that some force was awakening within Qiqiao, they seemed to understand something. It seemed that another ancient god was returning. However, Qiqiao was quite harsh on herself to reach this step. Did she not care about herself anymore? Their juniors were not so obedient. When Qiqiao looked up at the sky, her eyes had changed. They were different from before. It was as if those were the eyes of the true West Emperor. Yuanshi the Great raised a hand, and the force of divine punishment appeared in the sky above Qiqiao. But Qiqiao moved simultaneously, turning into a blur and vanishing. The raindrop divine sword stabbed through, and actually penetrated the incomplete formation of divine punishment. Yuanshi the Great looked up, frowning. The next moment, Qiqiao attacked the Vajra domain with the raindrop divine sword. This sword did not look very strong, and there wasn't any strong shaking. It was like countless raindrops fell down, but a hole appeared in the Vajra domain. It was penetrated by the raindrops, and then it collapsed. In fact, the sword continued rising. It stabbed through the sky above the Yi Imperial Palace, forming an opening in the Yi Imperial Palace. Go! Qiqiao yelled. Yi Futian released his celerity, and his body vanished. He was the target of the 5 great emperors, so he had to leave the Yi Imperial Palace. Otherwise, all the other cultivators would be affected. Go where? Heavenly Emperor Jiang looked up at the vanished figure. Using his mind, his body also disappeared from the spot. Traceless celerity of the Buddhist clan was one of the strongest divine techniques in the world. It was traceless, but it was not undefeatable. There were no truly undefeatable techniques in the world. Cultivation level was the basis for everything. They had not yet recovered their abilities from before, but they were still great emperors. How could Yi Futian escape from their hands? The 5 great emperors vanished at the same instant. Chapter 2788 A Fatal Attack. Chapter 2788 A Fatal Attack. The 5 great emperors appeared in different locations in the sky outside the Yi Imperial Palace. A curtain of light appeared in the dome of the sky, blocking the sky and covering the vast space. Yi Futian's figure also appeared in the upper space. He was not able to leave. The vast sky and land were locked. The other could cover more distance with a thought than he could move with celerity. This was the will of the great emperor. Various figures rushed into the sky from below. The cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace were all traveling towards here too. The clouds changed in the sky. A frightening aura of the Great Way rolled and roiled. Green divine light covered the sky and sun. Yi Futian stared down at the 5 great emperors, sensing the force. The 5 stood in different directions, and their bodies all had very different feelings, but there were still similarities. The 5 of them became one unified body, making Yi Futian feel that they had split up the world, and this space had become an independent entity. Each person was a completely different individual. They were the gods of their own territories. The 5 had once been great emperors, so they naturally had the aura of a great emperor, and they knew what a great emperor meant. This aura was completely natural rather than purposeful. Cultivators had to become one with the world while cultivating. The state that the Runhuang pursued was to shine with the sun and moon, have the same longevity as the world, and have their own will become the will of the heavens. Their will represented the will of the world, represented the way, and was the ultimate state that the cultivators pursued. But now Yi Futian felt a very different aura. It went against everything he knew about cultivation. They had become unified, and to them, they had cultivated to the extreme, and should represent their own world. They were independent, and were their absolute selves. There is no way in the world. Yi Futian thought of the words carved by Xinjia the great emperor. Was this the ultimate state of cultivation? While Yi Futian was pondering, the 5 great emperors did not plan on letting him go. Heavenly Emperor Jiang raised his head, and looked up into the sky. The immense divine power sealed the sky, causing Yi Futian's celerity to become ineffective. When he tried to move, he discovered that the sky had been sealed by the divine power. Endless runes shimmered with divine light. It was extremely dazzling. Yi Futian's body shone with divine light. The green light wrapped around him, and his battle form appeared. He waved the divine ruler, wanting to shatter the void. Explosions kept sounding in the space, but below him, Heavenly King Jiang used his mind, and a divine halberd appeared. It radiated with immense divine light, then vanished from the spot. It shot up murderously despite the distance. Bang! The horrifying penetrative force shattered the space. The brilliant and golden divine halberd hacked through the divine ruler silhouettes that filled the sky. It passed right through the divine ruler's attack. The divine ruler was not a true divine weapon. It was formed by the law, but it still was not strong enough. It wasn't at the level of Heavenly Emperor Zhang's divine power. Even though Donghuang the Great, Di Hao, and other strong cultivators had comprehended divine power before, it was a completely different matter for the divine power from a Tianxin. Even if Donghuang the Great or Di Hao were here, the result would be the same. It was unstoppable. Their usage of their divine power was utterly unmatchable by Donghuang the Great and the other heirs. This was a difference in state, and could not be made up for. Yi Futian's body was sent flying again. He spat out blood, and his aura kept weakening, but he still stood there. This surprised Heavenly Emperor Zhang's group. He was this strong. They knew how strong their attacks had been. An attack by their current divine power was enough to make someone lose their combat ability and destroy the way in their bodies. In the distance, many cultivators looked over. Many of them were cultivators of the Ziwei segmentum and former original realm. They had experienced a massacre earlier. Now that they saw even Yi Futian could not fight back, they couldn't help but feel depressed. Were the few who had attacked already at this strong state? They were like heavenly gods. Cultivators from other regions hurried over too. They were extremely shocked when they saw the scene in the sky. The 5 ancient god clans of the divine prefecture had come to hunt and kill Yi Futian. It had once been the 6 ancient god clans, but Yi Futian had wiped out 1 ancient god clan. Tianyan City and Tianyan the Great had been killed. No wonder the 5 ancient god clans would attack. They were worried that they would follow in the steps of Tianyan the Great. They wouldn't be assured until Yi Futian was killed. Below, Ling Long, Shi Qiyao, and others tried to charge up, but they were stopped. They couldn't block the attacks. The other 4 great emperors were still there, using divine power directly to block their paths. They stood in different locations and looked up at Heavenly Emperor Jiang, prepared to witness Heavenly Emperor Jiang kill Yi Futian. Unexpectedly, this hit was not enough. Yi Futian was quite tenacious, as expected of someone who once threatened the ancient god clans. But no matter how strong he was still an ant to them now. He would die today. Tenacious, Heavenly Emperor Jiang said. In that instant, divine power shrouded the vast world. The boundless void was filled with an extremely sharp aura. Countless divine halberds appeared. Each halberd was made of divine power, and flared with divine light that could penetrate the sky. The divine halberd before Heavenly Emperor Jiang was especially so. It flared with 10,000 beams of divine light, and stabbed towards Yi Futian. Oh no! All the cultivators outside the domain thought when they saw this. Many of their hearts trembled. It was as if they were watching the destruction of Yi Futian. Yi Futian's huge battle form materialized in the sky. He hefted the power of the divine ruler. At the same time, countless spatial divine formations appeared in the sky. The huge wheel of space seemed able to swallow up all attacks. However, when in contrast to the light of all the divine halberds, everyone felt the aura of death. This extraordinary and bright cultivator may very well die in this battle, killed by 5 ancient gods. No! There was a low sound in the lower sky. It was extremely muffled. The person did not scream. The voice was filled with tragedy. It was all women's voices. Many beautiful faces appeared in the lower sky, and they all looked up with despair. They were not even qualified to participate in the battle. Suddenly it started raining. The raindrops were endless, and dropped down, as if the sky was crying. At the same time, the divine sword pierced through the sky, shooting murderously towards the atrium. It slammed against the divine power barrier, penetrating it. But at the same moment, all the divine halberds in the sky pierced through, filling the sky with countless beams of divine light. The beams of golden light cut horizontal arcs in the sky. It was extremely shocking. Even the dome of the sky has been stabbed through. Yi Futian was at the center of the attack. Countless eyes were trained on him, witnessing this destructive attack. Chapter 2789 Break the Path. Chapter 2789 Break the Path. It was as if time had stopped. Countless eyes were trained on the dome of the sky, staring at the destructive divine light that flooded the sky. It was especially so for the strong cultivators from the Yi Imperial Palace. It was as if they could not feel that gust of destructive power. They stared entranced. For them, it was as if everything in the world had stopped moving. Bang! The muffled sound filled the world, causing this vast place to shake. This hit shattered the domain. They saw the battle form shatter, and saw the divine light extinguish. Yi Futian's figure disappeared. It was over. The 5 great emperors and strong cultivators of the ancient god clans all had a thought it would be impossible for Yi Futian to still exist after such a hit. Everything below the great emperor level would cease to exist. But they continued to stare up at the sky. Would Yi Futian's power of divine ruler appear after he died? Even as ancient gods, they still wanted that power. The rain continued to fall. The raindrops from the heavens were abnormally sharp, and yet contained very heavy emotions of depression. Many people from the Yi Imperial Palace were crying. Their tears fell with the rain. For many people of the Yi Imperial Palace, Yi Futian was family, a friend, a senior in their belief. Shi Qiao had already broken through the defenses and arrived where Yi Futian had been. But she did not see Yi Futian's figure. As the goddess of the West Imperial Palace, even she was crying now too. A shocking aura flooded from her divine sword. It was swallowing her up, continuously changing her eyes. Poof! There was suddenly a soft sound in the silent space. Somewhere high up in the sky, a figure appeared. It was Yi Futian's figure. His appearance gave a sliver of hope to countless people. He did not die. Yi Futian had not fallen. He was still here. He actually survived such a world-ending blow. However, Yi Futian was in a fragile state right now. Divine light still flowed over his body, but he no longer had the aura of the Great Path. His entire being seemed weak and insubstantial, as if he could disappear at any moment. However, the aura of life continued to envelop him. His vitality had not been extinguished. Right now Yi Futian had sunk into absolute weakness. All of the paths in his body had been destroyed. The Great Path no longer existed. At the same time, he had entered an extremely miraculous state. He seemed to have a much clearer perception of the world. Even though his ways had been destroyed, in his perception, all the power in the world seemed to have been printed into his mind. This included the other party's divine power. What was the path? The way was the laws that the world operated under. When cultivators studied the power of the path, they were using the rules of the world. Then what was divine power? Was it separate from the world, and a law in and of itself? Perhaps that is so. Color is emptiness. Emptiness is color. There is no way in the world. Perhaps the ancients had already pointed out the path. But this path was not easy to step onto. This path had stopped countless extraordinary figures. All of this ran through Yi Futian's mind, while it had only been an instant in the outside world. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others could not help but furrow their brows at seeing that Yi Futian was still alive. They believed they'd already shown Yi Futian enough respect. The 5 great emperors had all come to kill Yi Futian. Even if Yi Futian died, it was still an honorable death. But until now, the person they thought could be killed easily, like an ant, was actually still alive. It had been so long, but they still had not killed this ant. As great emperors, this was not very glorious. This Yi Futian was honestly tenacious. He's alive. Shi Qiao looked in Yi Futian's direction, and she had the feeling of surviving from the cracks of danger. A bright smile appeared in her beautiful eyes as if the crisis had already passed. However, the 5 great emperors were still there. Yi Futian had only withstood one attack without dying. Plus, she could also feel that Yi Futian had entered the mystery plane. Boom! Her long hair danced wildly, and the falling raindrops intensified. They continued hammering down from the sky. A great emperor's aura radiated from Shi Qiao. Yi Futian's figure disappeared in the curtain of rain. Shi Qiao looked towards Yi Futian. There were tears in her eyes, but she was still smiling. She was reluctant, but she also felt closure as if looking at him for the last time. Then she closed her eyes, and her entire body became one with the divine sword. When her eyes opened again, they were different. They held some arrogance, as if she was looking down at the world. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others all felt the changes in Shi Qiao's aura and temperament simultaneously. They knew that this Shi Qiao was not the same Shi Qiao as before. The founder of the West Imperial Palace, the West Emperor, had returned too. This idiot, Shi Qiao uttered. But it was unknown who she was talking about. The raindrops formed a domain that shrouded this land. There was only unstopping rain within the sheets of rain. There was no Yi Futian. Every drop of rain seemed to be formed by divine power. A curtain of light appeared around Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the Vajra Realm Great Emperor. It covered their bodies, but as the rain kept falling, there were actually dents in the light. Then some places were penetrated. Rain could erode rock through time. These raindrops could penetrate the defenses created by Vajra Realm divine power. West Emperor, Heavenly Emperor Jiang said, raising his head to look at Shi Qiao. Since you are also a returned man, why must we be enemies? We are all from the ancient god clans of the divine prefecture. Our heritages carry the countless years, and we awoke to return. You should not interfere with today's matters. This girl is extremely compatible with me, Shi Qiao said. It was clear that she was no longer herself. I already discovered this years ago. I was unwilling to return in this way, and instead wanted to wait for her to grow stronger. However, she actually chose to use this way to help me today. Then I naturally have to complete her last wish. But can you really do it? Heavenly King Jiang said. Clearly, he did not think the West Emperor could stop them just by returning. After all, it was 1 against 5. It should not take too long. The West Emperor could feel that Yi Futian was completely immersed in his world, entering the mystery plane. He could also feel the raindrops filling the air. The rain dripped down from his body. Every drop contained extremely pure divine power. My force of the great path has been destroyed. My comprehension of the world seems to have become clearer. This was a thought that appeared in Yi Futian's mind. There is no way in the world. Color is emptiness, emptiness is color. These two voices kept echoing in Yi Futian's mind. He also thought of how when he'd been studying in the Buddhist clan, the Buddha had said that the Lord of all Buddhas had gone to the colorless heaven to cultivate Akasanantiyatana, Vijnanantiyatana, the first sky of the colorless heaven to resonate with the boundless skies. The second sky, to make your heart boundless. Nothingness. The cultivators all pursued to have, but the supreme discipline of Buddhism was to pursue nothingness. Since the great path is blocked, then break the path. This thought appeared in Yi Futian's mind. Then a tribulation descended, penetrating his body, cutting his way. Boom. Pain appeared on Yi Futian's face. He had cultivated various ways. Even though Heavenly Emperor Jiang had destroyed the paths with one blow, there were still remaining wills of the path. But now, Yi Futian wanted to break his path. The cultivators of the world all pursued the extremes of the path, wanting more powerful force of the great path. But right now Yi Futian wished to break his own path. Chapter 2790 The Third Tribulation. Chapter 2790 The Third Tribulation. The destructive attack cut down directly onto his body, penetrating his body and divine soul. Yi Futian's body trembled, and his pallor was sickly pale. The will of the great way started scattering from his body as he was breaking his path. Breaking your path needed a resolute mindset. It was so cruel to take a weapon and hurt yourself. Yet breaking your path was even more terrifying. Hurting the path within you was not only hurting your flesh body. Green divine light flooded out, transforming into the law of the divine ruler, as if wanting to return to the force of the outside world instead of his own body. The law of the divine ruler hung in the air. Yi Futian looked up at it and clenched his jaw. Poof! With a thought, the law of the divine ruler passed through his body. It was like stabbing into the demonic lord's body. Even more terrifying destructive wills of the Great Way cut apart the traces of the Great Way within him. The way in his body was being destroyed bit by bit. He had an extremely pained expression. The natal spirit created in the life palace and the divine wheel of the great path were all destroyed, collapsing crazily. More light of the divine ruler gathered and cut down again. It went down on his internal organs for limbs and hundreds of bones, wiping all the traces clean. The war in the outside world was still happening, but it seemed unrelated to him right now. At the moment, he was going through the most intense pain since birth. It was unimaginable how much pain he had to endure to wipe away all imprints left in his body. Tui! He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His body's aura weakened rapidly, but he still did not stop his actions. There was no hope for today's battle anyway. Even if he did not break his path, he would still die. So why not try and see if he could find the way to break through the constraints? This kind of pain lasted for a very long time. Futian closed his eyes. He was already so weak that he couldn't even keep his eyes open. At present, his body hovered in the void powerlessly. He could feel that his current state was like a newborn infant. Everything had gone back to its original state. The only thing that remained was the world tree. The other wills of the path in the world tree's spirit had been broken off. It seemed to have transformed into just an ancient tree. Strands of aura wrapped around him and fused into his limbs and bones, supporting him so that his vitality didn't run out. Everything in the world seemed to have fallen silent. It was extremely quiet. Futian could not sense any outer objects. Floating quietly in the air, his body did not have any impurities left. They had all been removed, as if everything had been reset. Humans were in this state when they were first born too. It was also the most original and purest state. However, what was different was that Futian still had his thoughts and his own will. He felt that his body was like a leafy tree. He could easily hover in the air, and he was entering the state of nothingness. In this nothingness, he suddenly saw the entire world again. The battles in the outside world were imprinted in his mind. He also saw the cultivators watching from a distance, and the changes in expression of the Yi Imperial Palace cultivators. Everything was so clear. It was as if he could see all beings. Every single thing was imprinted onto his mind, including the fine expressions. Rain continued to splatter from the sky. He seemed to see the sky crying. From nothing to everything, the world tree had melded into Futian's body, fusing with his flesh. The power of the divine ruler was combining with his body, bit by bit, as if it had always been a part of his body. His broken body was reforming, but there were no impurities at all. A frightening cloud of tribulation suddenly appeared in the dome of the sky. A suffocating windstorm enveloped this place. It was extremely frightening. At that moment, countless people looked up to the sky. Even cultivators who had gone through cultivation could feel fear come from the depths of their souls. This aura frightened them, as if it could turn them to dust if it fell upon them. Tribulation. Someone caused a divine tribulation to come at this time. Who had caused this divine tribulation to come? They wanted to find that person, but then they saw the frightening aura lock onto one place. Beams of tribulation light penetrated the rain and entered that place, causing the hearts of all cultivators to race. Futian would undergo tribulation in that domain of rain. He's going to have a breakthrough? Everyone's expressions were shocked. Futian was going to have a breakthrough in a time like this? Plus, Futian's combat ability had already been powerful. Even though it seemed like he was only in the Runhuang Plain, everyone felt that he'd already gone through the second divine tribulation of the Great Path. There were 3 divine tribulations. Futian had already gone through the second divine tribulation of the Great Path, so this one must be. Or could it be that Futian had only gone through the first tribulation, despite the terrifying combat ability that he displayed before? But even so, if Futian successfully underwent this tribulation, his cultivation would naturally evolve and become stronger. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others frowned. What was going on? Futian was going to go through tribulation now? Their attacks went even wilder, trying to kill Shi Qiyao. They were a bit annoyed earlier. They still saw Futian as an ant who couldn't change his destiny. He would die without a doubt. But seeing this tribulation, they were a bit doubtful. Yi Futian had already displayed super strong abilities earlier. If he went through another tribulation, how strong would his cultivation be? But where did this tribulation come from? Shi Qiao looked up for a glance. Even though she was no longer just Shi Qiao, Shi Qiao's consciousness still had not faded away. When she averted her eyes, she looked down with determined eyes. Boom! The raindrop divine sword hovered in the sky. All the sword rain transformed into a sword river. The rainstorm poured, shooting towards Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others. Her goal was not to kill the enemy. It was enough to delay them for some time. Whether this was the first or any other number of tribulations, Yi Futian would transform. At that time, even Heavenly Emperor Jiang's group might not be able to deal with him. The aura in the dome of the sky grew even more frightening. The cultivators below started to feel suffocated. They felt the power of strands of supreme law order. It was as if different tribulations of law were coming simultaneously. What is going on? Heavenly Emperor Jiang's brows knitted tightly while attacking. He was an ancient great emperor, but he had never felt this kind of tribulation. It was his first time. The problem for Yi Futian was different from those of the top cultivators in ancient times. Have you seen this tribulation before? Heavenly Emperor Jiang asked the other great emperors with his mind. He was a former great emperor, but he'd never seen this kind of tribulation before. No, the others replied. Their hearts were all impacted strongly, and they were a bit shocked. What kind of strange tribulation was this? Such a chaotic tribulation has not even existed before this, someone said. The 5 great emperors had not seen this before. Chapter 2791 After Tribulation. Chapter 2791 After Tribulation. I don't quite understand the present world after it mutated. Heavenly Emperor Jiang looked up to the sky with complex feelings in his eyes. The destructive divine light fell, and the various cultivators started escaping from this place. They sensed the danger. Even Heavenly Emperor Jiang's group felt a threatening feeling. Divine power circulated in their bodies, forming defensive power. Chaotic tribulation light formed above the sky. Billions of beams of tribulation light shot from the sky dome, going toward the same spot. Even the West Emperor avoided it. His body shimmered and he left that area. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others did not go towards Yi Futian either. The billions of beams of tribulation light rained down simultaneously, hitting Yi Futian's body. The cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace saw this, and their hearts raced powerfully. The tribulation that Yi Futian was undergoing right now was like Armageddon. Could he withstand it? Everyone looked up into the sky nervously. The billions of beams of light swallowed up Yi Futian's body. There was only destructive divine might there. You could not even see where Yi Futian's body was buried. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others trained their gazes there. Could he survive this kind of tribulation too? The power of this tribulation was dangerous even for them. This world does not allow him to exist. That is why this kind of divine tribulation has occurred. Heavenly Emperor Jiang said in a low voice. Yi Futian might have already threatened nature. What kind of force has he formed to incite such a tribulation? Haotian the Great's brows were knitted slightly. They had gone to the human realm before to improve their cultivations a bit. Before this, they could not take that step due to the restrictions of nature. Had Yi Futian taken that step before them now? However, could Yi Futian survive such a destructive divine tribulation? He reached a hand out. Instantly, a gigantic hand appeared in the destructive windstorm above the sky. This hand was formed by the Haotian divine power. Its might weighed down on the world, and went straight for the destructive windstorm, grabbing its center. Poof poof. Sharp sounds streamed out. The Haotian divine seal suffered frightening damages after rushing into the divine tribulation of destruction. However, the divine seal had been constructed of Haotian divine power. It continued to advance, going in and going towards the center. Boom! The storm made from the billions of beams of tribulation light went wild in the air. When the Haotian divine seal entered, it started falling apart, tearing and crumbling. It continuously scattered, and was quickly wiped away completely. This was only a tentative attack. Seeing this scene, there was surprise in his eyes, and it was the same for the other great emperors. their brows knitted tightly. Even the Haotian divine seal could not enter the heart of the destructive divine tribulation. One could imagine how much deadly force Yi Futian was bearing. He might die under the divine trial, but if he did not die, then he might threaten them. You all go back first, Heavenly Emperor Jiang said to the strong cultivators of the Jiang clan below. He waved a hand, and a door of space opened instantly. Divine power surged. The other end of the door seemed to be an extremely faraway place. The Jiang ancient god clan cultivators flashed forward and entered it, temporarily leaving this place. It was unexpected that a change had occurred when the 5 great emperors came to kill Yi Futian today. The other great emperors also sent away the cultivators of their ancient god clans. Even though they did not care for their lives, they were still the descendants. It was best to send them away, because no one knew what would happen here. They did not continue fighting and killing others. To them, everyone below the great emperor level were ants. If Yi Futian were not qualified to become an emperor, they would not have come to kill Yi Futian. As for the other lives, they did not care at all. All the people they killed had just been convenient along the way. Now, they only wanted to know what changes would occur after Yi Futian's tribulation. At this time, strong cultivators arrived gradually from afar. The strong cultivators of the divine prefecture had arrived. Dong Huang the Great had come personally. Yu Sheng also arrived, leading the cultivators of the devil world. The human realm followed. Cultivators of all realms arrived one after another, coming to this area. At the same time, another shocking aura descended from the sky. Emperors might envelop this area. It was the will of the great emperor that had arrived. Dong Huang the Great's face was the first to appear in the sky. He looked down at Yi Futian, and saw the frightening tribulation light fade gradually. Yi Futian's body appeared in the center. Right now, he did not have any aura of the great path on his body, but divine light wrapped around his body. His entire body was dazzling, and his skin was like that of an infant's. It was like he'd gone through rebirth. All impurities had been removed, and he'd returned to the original state. Dong Huang, were you the one who sent those 5? A cold voice said. It was the dark sovereign who'd spoken. A dark figure appeared above the sky, and divine might descended. His voice held some hints of mockery. No. Dong Huang the Great refuted directly. His expression was a bit scornful. The dark sovereign scoffed coldly. Even if you didn't, you should have arrived very early. 5 former great emperors were working together to kill Yi Futian in the divine prefecture, while you just watched. You know that they were former great emperors, so they naturally have their own wills. I'm afraid I can't dissuade them, Dong Huang the Great said indifferently. His voice was quite cold and distant. As he spoke, he scanned the 5 people, and seemed to figure out something. However, Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others did not mind. Since they dared to expose themselves, they were naturally confident. Humph. The dark sovereign huffed coldly, and his gaze fell upon Yi Futian. This divine tribulation has never been seen in all of history. He seems to have broken his path to demand from the heavens. This kind of courage is difficult to come by, but I'm afraid it will threaten certain people. Dong Huang the Great knew what he was implying, and did not reply. Dong Huang naturally will not interfere since he promised before. Dark Sovereign, you think too little of the ruler of the divine prefecture, a voice sounded. It was the human ancestor's voice. He roared, the age of gods has come. Everything will happen naturally. I believe everyone wishes to witness a great world. When did the human ancestor become so understanding? The dark sovereign said sarcastically. I am the human ancestor, and I rule the human realm. Naturally, I wish humanity can flourish. The human ancestor was full of righteousness. His voice filled with the world, and made people want to salute him. However, the dark sovereign and others scoffed inside, dismissing the human ancestor's words. While they spoke, another figure moved in the lower sky. It was the Vajra realm great emperor. His body flashed, advancing towards Yi Futian. Then he pointed at Yi Futian. The Vajra divine power transformed into a destructive finger that stabbed through the world to kill Yi Futian. A great emperor had descended. He still attacked, wanting to kill Yi Futian. The other great emperors in the sky did not move. They all looked down. What level would Yi Futian be after the divine tribulation? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.